Okay, everyone. So we are on practice file 2 of this repository on how to work with Excel using Python. So if you haven't, you should have watched the previous video where we installed openpyxl. If not, just go back to the previous video. And here we're going to actually start working with it. So the idea is that openpyxl lets you create workbook objects. And a workbook is just an Excel document. Like if I were to open up Excel, I already have one open up here. Okay, so this, what I'm seeing right now would be a workbook. And a workbook can have multiple sheets within it, right? And every sheet can have multiple columns and rows as well as cells. So like A1 is a specific cell. So hello. A is a column, B is a column, right? And row 1, row 2. And specific cells have names like B2 would be the reference to this. This is B2. Okay. So the library that we just installed basically lets us create these workbooks and allows us to manipulate and loop through workbooks and specific sheets like that. Okay. So if you want to work with these, first you just need to type out import. And let's hide some of this. Import openpyxl. Again, that might be openpyxl. I've heard both. I'm in the habit of calling it openpyxl though, so I'm just going to keep calling it that. Then let's create a workbook. I'm just going to call mine WB. It's really short. And I'm going to say, hey, openpyxl, you have some capability to create workbook objects. So I'm going to do openpyxl.workbook. And this is going to create a workbook object and store that workbook object inside of this variable that we call WB. Okay, so we could do this, we could run this, and nothing's going to happen yet, right? So our code is working, but we've created a workbook in our computer's memory and then did nothing with it. So we need to actually do stuff with it, and eventually we need to save it to a file, and we'll be able to see that down here when we are finished working with it. So you can also store sheets. So you might have noticed, like back when I go through here, when I opened up a workbook in the actual Excel app, it started off with a specific sheet. It said sheet 1. That's kind of just the default. So in fact, I could say, hey, I want to store the current sheet, make up a variable name for it. And WB has this .active property. And that's just what the active sheet is. So I can store the current sheet in a variable. And then I can reference that current sheet either through wb.active, or I can store that sheet in a variable and then use that variable name to edit that worksheet. So let's just use this variable that we created. And then let's use square brackets and let's say A1. Let's say name. And then let's see, name and grade, then something to the second row. Okay, so let's make a few pieces of data. So let's just do 2 rows just to save time. Let's say name, James, and James has an A-. So we are editing the data in the current sheet. Just like before, when I open it up, remember A1 is a reference to this specific cell. We got the active sheet, which is just the sheet that's first created that's viewable when you open Excel, like this. We stored that in a variable, and then we're editing that sheet over here. And we can run this again, and nothing's going to happen. It's going to do all this, but we're just creating our workbook in memory. We're editing it, but we're not actually saving it. If we want to see the results of what we're doing, we need to reference our workbook and do .save. And then inside of here, we're going to give it a file name. So I'm working in practice file 2. So I'm just going to call this example 2. Make sure you give it the file name of, or the file extension type of what this is. So Excel files have the extension of XLSX. So just make sure you give it a name, a dot, and then the file extension of XLSX. So once you do that, and actually let me just talk quickly about closing the workbook. because we can do that on the, I'm just going to do it right on the same line so we can see. So saving it is going to create an actual file that we can look at. So we're going to talk about that. Then closing it removes it from your computer's memory, from Python needing to work with it. It's a really good idea to close a workbook after you save it. Even if it's the end of your program, it's still a good idea just to get in the habit of doing it. It's going to free up memory so your computer can work more efficiently while you're running the Python code. If your code ends, it should close it automatically without you needing to put this code here, but it's still just a good habit to get into. So let me run this, and you're going to notice after I run it, there should be a file that pops up over here. So let me run my code, and there we go. We have this example too, right here. And I'm going to be able to click and open this. Or in fact, before I do that, let me just right click here. I'm going to do reveal in Finder. If you're on Windows, it should say reveal or show in File Explorer. Same thing. You just click that. You should be able to see the Excel file that you just created. You can double click. And there we have it. We just created an Excel file and placed some data inside of there. It's pretty cool, right? So we're not doing anything too complicated yet, but that's pretty awesome actually. Let me go over again. Now that we have this open, we can probably just close that out too. Let's close that one. Let's go back to here. This is good to bring up as well. You might notice this little squiggly tilde sign right here, where with the money sign right there. Whenever you have an Excel file open, any changes that you make are being made to this working copy, but as soon as you close it, it'll go away. So if I were to exit out of here, yeah, that should disappear. That's just how Excel works, and all Microsoft Office documents actually. Also, you might want to just click right here and see what the Excel spreadsheet looks like. By default, that wouldn't work in VS Code. But if you go to extensions, if you look, what's it called? Excel Viewer, I think is the one I've installed. Okay, so I've installed this Excel Viewer. You might have to just type out the whole thing if your computer's not showing it. But I have this Excel Viewer extension installed, so I just pushed the blue install button right here. And that makes it so that if I open up an Excel file in VS Code, it shows up here. That's sometimes just nice to do. I just want to make sure I mention this. Let's say I come back to my code and I change it so James now has a C, and then I run my code. If I look back over here to my open Excel file, I might think that my code isn't working. My code is working, I just was having this file open the whole time. I need to close it and then reopen it to see the effects actually be visible. Same thing if you open it in the actual Excel app. So if you reveal in Finder and open it up here, I'm gonna see C right there. All right, let's make it a little bit bigger. If I were to go back to my code though, let's say he now has a B, I run my code, and then I say, hey, why is it still C, right? I need to exit out and then reopen the file, and now I can see, oh, it's a B. That's just something I want to make sure we go over, because I've seen some students get really confused because they think they're doing something wrong, but really they just aren't closing and reopening it to see the changed file. So just something to be aware of. So let's close that for now. Then we'll end the video here, and then I'll make a new video for file number 3.